Thomas Thornton's last known moments began quietly. Almost too quietly. He walked out of his home, keys in hand, slid into his SUV, and pulled away like it was any ordinary day. No arguments, no warnings, no signs that anything was wrong. Yet that short drive would become the beginning of one of the most baffling disappearances his community had ever witnessed. Hours passed, then a full day. Thomas didn't return. At first, his family thought he might have stopped somewhere, maybe lost track of time. But as the sun dipped behind the horizon and his phone went straight to voicemail, fear crept in. Thomas wasn't the kind of man who simply vanished. He was stable, responsible, predictable in the best way. For him to miss calls, to miss work, to miss home, was completely out of character. When police got involved, the situation became even more alarming. His SUV had left no trace, no skid marks, no abandoned vehicle, no credit card trail, no pings from his phone. It was as if the road itself had swallowed him whole. Friends and family traced his usual routes. Officers checked highways, pull-off points, ravines, and shallow bodies of water. But nothing. It didn't make sense. Cars don't just disappear. People don't just evaporate. Yet Thomas had. And that chilling impossibility is exactly what turned his story into a haunting mystery. One that would remain unsolved for years, hidden in silence, darkness, and deep water. The investigation into Thomas Thornton's disappearance began with urgency, but it didn't take long for investigators to realize they were facing a case unlike any other. With no immediate evidence, no activity on his accounts, and no witnesses who saw his SUV after he left home, every possibility was on the table. Search teams first retraced the routes Thomas commonly drove. Main roads, back roads, rural stretches, and sharp curves known for accidents. Police brought in local volunteers, drones, helicopters, and ground units. They searched ditches, wooded trails, and every spot where a vehicle could have gone unnoticed. Nothing. Then came the early theories. Some thought Thomas may have suffered a medical emergency and pulled over somewhere hidden from view. Others feared he might have been the victim of a crime, carjacking, robbery, or foul play. But there was zero evidence to support any of it. His phone had gone silent almost immediately after he left. His bank cards weren't used. His SUV wasn't found abandoned anywhere. One perplexing fact stood out. No one reported seeing him on the road. Not a single confirmed sighting. Not even from cameras along the way. It was as if Thomas and his SUV slipped into an empty space between reality and disappearance. Days turned into weeks. The case grew colder, but the fear grew sharper. Thomas wasn't the type to wander off. He had responsibilities, routines, and people depending on him. Something had gone wrong, badly wrong. But without evidence, investigators couldn't push in any direction with certainty. Family members printed flyers and organized search parties of their own. They walked riverbanks, hiked steep slopes, and asked residents along lakes and bridges if they had seen or heard anything unusual that night. Still, nothing. The silence was suffocating. Eventually, the official search was scaled back. Investigators admitted privately that they were out of leads. Without a crash site, a witness, or a trace of the SUV, they were essentially blind. But deep down, those closest to Thomas held on to one quiet fear, the one scenario that made too much sense. If Thomas's SUV had gone into the water, a lake, a river, a reservoir, it could stay hidden for years. The only problem? Traditional searches had already scanned those waters and found absolutely no sign. Or so they thought. Years had passed since Thomas Thornton vanished, and for most people the case had slipped into the background. Another cold file, another name on a list of unsolved disappearances. But for his family, the wound never healed. They kept pushing, kept asking questions, kept hoping for a discovery that seemed impossible. That turning point came when new technology entered the picture. A fresh look at Thomas's case drew the attention of search divers specializing in underwater sonar, equipment far more advanced than what investigators had access to during the original search. This technology didn't just scan the surface or shallow edges. It penetrated deeper, sending high-frequency waves into places the human eye and older equipment could never reach. The team decided to scan a lake along one of Thomas's potential routes. It wasn't a random choice. It was a location previously searched years earlier by traditional methods. At the time, authorities had declared it clear. But on this day, the sonar device returned an unmistakable shape. A solid, box-like outline, sharp angles, definite structure. Not a rock, not a fallen tree, not debris. It was the size, the shape, the signature of a vehicle. The team froze. They ran the scan again. Same result. The outline sat deep, buried in silt, invisible from the surface. It had been there for years, undisturbed, hidden like a secret sealed in darkness. Divers entered the water, descending into the murky shadows below. Visibility was almost zero. Their hands touched cold metal. They brushed away years of sediment. An SUV. The same make, the same model. The same color Thomas drove the night he vanished. The confirmation hit everyone at once. They had found him. Inside the submerged SUV were human remains later identified as Thomas Thornton. The mystery that had tormented his family for years was suddenly in front of them. Tragic, heartbreaking, and completely real. Proof that Thomas hadn't run away. Proof that foul play wasn't likely. Proof that an accident, simple and sudden, had taken him off the grid and into the water, where no one could see him. The lake had swallowed everything that night. His SUV, his final moments, and every clue investigators needed. But now, after years of silence, the water had finally given him back. When the SUV was finally brought to the surface, investigators approached it with a level of detail and care reserved for the most sensitive cases. This wasn't just a vehicle. They knew it likely held the answers to Thomas Thornton's final moments. What they found painted a clearer picture than anyone expected. The SUV showed no signs of forced entry. No broken windows. No dents or scrapes, suggesting another vehicle had pushed it off the road. No evidence of a struggle inside. This wasn't a crime scene. It was an accident. The path leading to the water revealed subtle clues that had been missed years before. The slope near the lake's edge was sharper than it looked at a glance. The ground was soft, the curve tight, and the barrier that existed there today didn't exist back then. A single miscalculation, a moment of distraction, a medical event, or even low visibility at night could cause a vehicle to drift off the pavement and slide down the incline. Once a vehicle entered that lake, physics took over. The water was deep enough and dark enough that within seconds, the SUV would have been submerged. The weight, the angle, and the downward slope ensured it sank quickly, settling into thick layers of silt that hid it completely from early searches. Inside, everything was largely intact. Time and water had taken their toll, but the arrangement of the vehicle suggested Thomas had been driving normally when the SUV entered the lake. There were no signs of evasive action, no sudden swerves, no braking that could be detected. Just a calm, tragic descent. It explained everything investigators hadn't been able to answer before. Why the SUV wasn't spotted? Why sonar from the early searches detected nothing? Why no one had witnessed the accident? And why Thomas's voice, his trail, his presence, had vanished instantly? The discovery confirmed it. Thomas hadn't walked away. He hadn't chosen to disappear. He was the victim of a quiet, devastating accident hidden in a place few would ever think to look. For authorities, the recoveries solved the case. But for his family, it did something far more meaningful. It gave them the truth, the real truth. Not guesses, not theories, not imagined endings, just answers. When the news broke that Thomas Thornton had finally been found, the reaction was immediate and overwhelming. For years, his loved ones had lived in a painful limbo, caught between hope and heartbreak, imagining every possible scenario. Now, at last, they had the truth. And with that truth came a kind of peace they hadn't felt since the day he vanished. The recovery of Thomas's SUV didn't just close a case. It closed a wound. Friends and family gathered to honor him, remembering Thomas not for the mystery that surrounded his disappearance, but for the man he was, steady, kind, dependable, and deeply loved. The discovery allowed them to hold a proper memorial, to share stories, to finally speak about him in past tense without guilt or confusion. For investigators, the case became a reminder of something critical. Even when a disappearance seems impossible to solve, time and technology can uncover the truth. What was invisible years ago becomes clear today. What was once lost can surface again. Thomas's story also became a powerful message for communities everywhere. Many missing persons don't vanish because of crime or foul play. Some are victims of tragic, unseen accidents, vehicles hidden underwater, sunk in dark places where no one thinks to look. His case stands as proof of why persistent searching matters, why cold cases deserve a second look, and why families should never feel abandoned by the system. Most importantly, Thomas's family can finally breathe. The uncertainty is gone. The sleepless nights of wondering are over. Their loved one was not forgotten. And now, neither is his story. And if you're here, watching until the final minute, you're part of that impact. By keeping these stories alive, you help honor the missing, support families still searching, and push for answers that matter. So if you want more real stories, more solved mysteries, and more long-awaited closures, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. Every click helps bring these cases to light and ensures that no one's story, like Thomas Thornton's, is ever lost again.